So why don't we talk a bit about how you perceive a strong MBA application in the sense of what is a good competitive score for a GMAT? How much did your work experience at your respective law firms play a part in your application? How did you go about writing your statement of purpose, and how did you procure your letters of recommendation, and how did you prep for the interview?
I'm happy to take that question first. I know your question had a lot of subparts, so if I missed some of it, just please point it out again. So for me, in terms of the application process, talking about the GMAT, I took it twice. The first time I took it, this was in the previous format. The first time I took it, I got a 700, which is what I used for applying to Cambridge Judge. Again, broadly speaking, the average GMAT scores for schools in Europe is slightly lower than for schools in the US. So GMAT tends to be more competitive here. So I took it again the next year when I intended to apply to the States. And that's when I got a 750, which is a very competitive score, irrespective of where you want to apply. I think what is an important caveat in terms of the GMAT is that you cannot put a threshold in terms of this is a good score and now you should apply, or the score is the reason you do or do not get in. But for me, what was important is that when I had a 750 on the GMAT, I knew for sure that if I don't get into a school, it cannot be because my GMAT wasn't good enough, because my GMAT is good for every school that I apply to. So it's just about making sure that an item that puts you on a level playing field of sorts with everyone else is not the reason you get disqualified. So that helped. The second factor with respect to the GMAT is that generally, irrespective of what the average score for a school is, the threshold for the GMAT would be higher for Indians, because a lot of these schools that you're applying to internationally are trying to create a community of lots of diverse people from different countries. The number of nationalities they have on their school is almost a thing they boast about. So they have a set number of people of sorts that they want to take from each country, which makes India a very competitive geography to be applying from. Because of which, again, the GMAT becomes even more important. Indians tend to have higher GMATs than most of the people at schools. So that was my experience with the GMAT in terms of how I prepared for it. I had registered with Magoosh at that time, which I thought was okay. What helped me more was material that I took from Manhattan Prep and all of the official GMAT material that I used. I think a great factor in terms of how you're performing are the official tests that GMAT offers, which I think a lot of people shy away from. They think they want to preserve the tests for later because there are only 5 official tests. But I think it's a great idea to take a test before you start preparing, so you know exactly where you're standing. And then you can build up on that as you go along. So it's a great parameter to be matching yourself against. Another thing which I felt with a lot of lawyers that I've spoken with is that I think people get scared of the math and the GMAT. And then eventually end up giving up on the exam or their MBA aspirations. Or they also think that because they're not sure about whether they want to pursue an MBA in the long run, they just keep overthinking about it and do not end up writing the GMAT. My advice on that aspect would be that the GMAT is valid for 5 years. If doing the MBA is even distantly on your mind, put your efforts to it and get the exam out of the way. It's most likely going to remain valid at any point that you choose to apply, which would be within a 5-year range. And not having the exam will not let you apply in the future. So just get the exam out of the way. So that's on the GMAT. In terms of the letters of recommendation and experience, I was at Sarala Machran for 4 years. So my experience was limited to that. I don't know how it would have been had I been somewhere else. But I think being at CAM worked out very well for me. I was doing the kind of work that I also wanted to pursue. I was doing M&A and PEVC focused law, which is sort of the space that I want to be in post-MBA, but more directly. So I either want to be doing PEVC work at PEVC firms or being in consulting, perhaps, of some specific firms that I'm considering, or both of which are very closely aligned to the work that I was doing pre my MBA. So I think that story aligned very well for me. And both of my recommendations came from partners at Amachran who were very, very supportive. So I think that part of the process, just in terms of who do you ask and how do you go about it, was not as challenging. There were 2 aspects that I found to be challenging. One was just preparing your application in a way that suits the MBA, because I feel that at least in terms of the way I was writing my resume as a lawyer, is just so different in comparison to how you write your resume when you're applying for an MBA or related roles. There is so much more focus on the result that you're deriving, the numbers, the benchmarks, the percentages. So everything is a lot more crisp. I think because we're lawyers, we tend to be a lot more verbose. So that was a huge, steep learning curve for me in terms of how do I change it and how do I make it more suited for where I'm applying. And the other was that a lot of people are unaware of the context that we're in. So Amachran is a huge firm in India, but nobody in the States really knows what it is. So how do you sell it? How do you put it across as something that was very beneficial for you, that works so well in the story? That was another thing. One third thing, which I did not think about then, but I think is important in the longer run, is not just what sounds nice when you're making the application, but what is relevant for you in terms of the post MBA goals that you have. So anybody who has better clarity around that and can spend some time doing that kind of work pre-applying for the MBA is actually going to be having a strong advantage in the long term, because when they're trying to apply, one, they can show they have previous work experience in that industry, and two, they will just have a better sense in terms of how they go about that entire process, which isn't something that I did. I was at the law firm throughout. But so it doesn't hinder the application process, but knowing where you want to be in the future and working towards it before the MBA is going to help you personally in the long term. Those are my inputs.